From a legal perspective, then, obviously this is a huge deal in terms of PR. It's a bombshell. I hope it's going to change the narrative, or at least it's a big momentum shift. But from a legal perspective, what was the point of this declaration? What is it going to do for Manson that this woman has said this? How is he hoping to use it?
So what he's done is he has submitted this declaration in the lawsuit against Evan Rachel Wood and Illma Gore, and he's asking the judge to consider it as additional evidence on the anti-SLAPP motion. The anti-SLAPP motion, for those of us who have been following the case, you know already, it's been out there for a long time. It feels like we've been waiting forever for a decision on it, and we still have a ways to go. But they had a hearing on it back in September, and at that point in time, the judge had expressed some skepticism about his intentional infliction of emotional distress claims being able to go forward. And so specifically what the judge was concerned about is that you have to show, or at least allege, that there was something that they did that is, so extreme and outrageous as to, violate kind of the basic norms and decency of society. And so the judge had expressed skepticism that Marilyn Manson was going to be able to meet this burden. Obviously, he's alleging a hoax, but he didn't have a witness at that point in time who had participated in it. He had witnesses who had been approached to participate in it, but who had declined. And of course, he had the scripts and the checklists and things like that they had provided to the accusers. But so this is now the bombshell in the sense that he now has somebody who did in fact participate in the hoax coming forward and explaining this was a hoax and this is how it went down. So that's really his objective here, is to have this additional piece that shows the judge, look, this is how the hoax was constructed. This was deliberate. This was something that they did that was purposeful. It took advantage of people who are, potentially vulnerable, potentially suggestible, and did that knowing that, according to her report, she was open about the fact that she didn't really think these things had happened to her. And yet they, basically tried to break her down and get her to say, yeah, it probably happened to me anyway. So that's really the legal question is that particular piece of information going to be enough to kind of get them over the bar to let those particular claims be able to go forward? Does this add anything to the mix when it comes to showing that their behavior, and by there I mean Evan Rachel Wood and Illma Gore, that their behavior was intentional, that it was malicious, that it was deliberate, that they were doing this with a plan to, harm Manson with false allegations? If this adds to his ability to prove that, then it definitely is going to put him in a better position to be able to survive that anti-SLAPP motion.
Yeah, and for people who are maybe perhaps new to this case, there are multiple dimensions to this. So not only does Manson have this declaration now from Ashley Morgan Smithline, but let's not forget his team has all of that information from Evan Rachel Wood's former girlfriend and co-conspirator, Illma Gore, that was given to them because Illma Gore gave her twin sister an old iPad that, as it happened, had all of this information about the conspiracy on it, incriminating information. And the sister, out of conscience, as I understand it, turned it over to Manson's team. And so there are for people who don't know, there are all of these different components of this that over time, Manson's team has been collecting and putting together. And while individually, we could say that any one piece is not 100% convincing, you put it all together and it really does paint a compelling picture of a really unprecedented, extensive hoax. And, this was something that I was talking about the other day. And I'm curious if you have thoughts on this. Historically speaking, is there anything like this that, this seems so unprecedented to me? I know we've talked about the Salem witch trials.
Salem.
Yeah.
Or like Salem.
Yeah. Or like the Fatty. I didn't know anything about this until someone told me, but the Fatty Arbuckle story. Are you familiar with that at all?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So he was a really famous actor in like early 20th century. And he was a large guy, Fatty Arbuckle. And there was a woman who died, I think, partying with him or whatever. And this grotesque story was created that he smothered her with his huge body. And so he actually had to go to court for this. He lost his career. It was a complete circus. And as it turned out, it was BS. And toward the end of his life, he started to enjoy a kind of a restoration, but then he died. Anyway, my point is, like, those are the only examples I can think of. Can you think of anything on this level of a hoax and hyper coordinated with multiple people? And you've got an HBO 2-part documentary over here, and you've got all these lawsuits, and she's pressuring the DA, and there's all of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head. I would say that there's a lot of common ground when you go back to the 90s era and look at some of those cases that were coming about at that time. I don't know that they necessarily have quite this much evidence of the coordination and like the deliberate construction of the hoax. But you certainly have situations where, the motives of people just happen to align conveniently with what would be achieved, by perpetrating a hoax. And so a lot of these situations with, for example, there was a case in Wenatchee, which is near where I live, one of the big child daycare sex abuse cases where like dozens of people are accused of sexually abusing children in these, awful and horrible ways. And then once you start, digging down into the circumstances, you have questioning scenarios like this that are, suggestive and extremely inappropriate with children. You have all of these sort of political, oppositions and stuff going on in the background, people who are enemies with other people who have their own like family and custody types of issues that are implicated. So these things can become a mess, pretty quickly. That's the type of thing I can think of as the best equivalent. But even those, it's not necessarily clear that it is deliberate to the extent that Ashley Morgan Smithline's declaration makes it appear that Evan Rachel Wood and Illma Gore's hoax was.